The bottle was the blue glass kind, square-shouldered, with a ground glass stopper that came out with a small sound like a held breath let go. I was 26, a bookbinder who rented the small back room of a fourth-floor apartment in the old Silk Quarter of Lyon, and the bottle in my hand belonged to the woman I rented the room from, the woman whose scent I had been breathing through the wall for 7 months, without once admitting that I had learned to tell what kind of evening she'd had by which note reached me last. Her name was Sabine. She was 33. She was a perfumer. Not the kind who works for a house, the kind who blends bespoke scents for private clients at a walnut organ of 200 bottles in the front room of her own apartment. And the blue bottle in my hand was the one scent she had never sold and never named, the one she wore herself, the one that was only ever in the air of the apartment when she was home.
Welcome, everyone! Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
My friend Cleo had dared me to try it on. Cleo had gone to the bathroom. I had the stopper out and the cool glass wand against the inside of my left wrist and the scent blooming up off my own skin for the first time. Close. Mine. When I heard the front door, which should not have opened for another 2 hours. And Sabine came into the front room in her work coat with a paper bag of bread under her arm. And she stopped, and she looked at me with the bottle in my hand and her scent on my wrist, and she set the bread down on the walnut organ, and she crossed the room, and she took my left wrist in her hand, not hard, but completely, the way she took everything she had decided about. And she lifted it to the cool air between us, and she said, in a low, even voice that did not announce itself, 4 words. She said, "Then wear it out." I spent the next 3 weeks living inside those 4 words. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. I want to back up first. My grandmother bound books. She bound them in a small shop in the Silk Quarter of Lyon for 51 years, the Kennet's Quarter on the slope of the Croix Rousse, where the looms used to run, and she raised me over the shop after my mother could not, and she taught me to bind on her lap before she taught me to read, and she died when I was 19, in the back room of the shop, with her hands smelling of wheat paste and leather the way they had smelled my whole life. She left me her bone folder, her sewing frame, her stock of cloth and board, and the shop's lease, which I could not afford to keep and gave up the year she died, and a single thing more, her sense of smell, which she had trained into me without either of us calling it training, because a bookbinder who cannot smell the difference between a sound old leather and a rotting one, between a paper that has been kept dry and a paper that has been kept damp, between a glue that has gone over and a glue that is still good, is a bookbinder who will ruin more than she saves. I have my grandmother's nose. It is the one thing I have that is worth more than money. I am about to tell you about the evening the woman in this story put her own scent on a strip of paper and asked me to tell her what I smelled in it. But I have to back up first, because the strip of paper is not the part that mattered. My grandmother was also the most careful woman I have ever known, and I do not mean it as a compliment, though it took me until Lyon to understand that it was not one. She raised me behind the correct line. She had been left by my grandfather, and then by my mother, different kinds of leaving. Both of them the kind that teaches a woman that the safe thing is to need no one and to be needed quietly. And she had built a whole life out of being the binder everyone in the quarter trusted with the thing they could not replace, the family Bible, the dead husband's letters, the only photograph. And she gave those things back mended and asked for very little money and less thanks. And she died having mended half the precious paper on the Croix Rousse and having let no one mend anything of hers. I loved her more than I have loved anyone, and I learned everything I am from her hands, and I also watched her be lonely for 19 years with a dignity so complete that I mistook it, the whole time, for contentment, and did not understand until I was lying awake in a perfumery breathing another woman's scent through a wall that my grandmother had taught me her loneliness the same way she taught me the paste, by example, a little long, on purpose, until I thought it was just how the thing was done. So when I tell you that I rented a dry room and kept to the correct side of it for 7 months while I fell in love through a wall, I want you to understand that I came by it honestly. It was the family recipe. I came to rent Sabine's back room the way you come to most of the turns of your life, by accident and at the worst possible moment. I'd been binding for a small press and a handful of private restoration clients out of a damp studio near the Saône that flooded twice a year, and the second flood of that year had taken a client's 18th century missal that I had spent a month resuing, and I had paid for the missal out of money I did not have, and I had needed, very suddenly, a room that was dry, because a bookbinder cannot work in damp and I had nowhere dry to put my hands. I saw the advertisement on the board of the paper shop on the Rue d'Ivry, a card handwritten in a small exact hand. Back room to let, dry quiet, suit a craftsperson, no smokers. The apartment is a working perfumery and the tenant must not mind scent. I did not mind scent. I called the number. A low, even voice answered and asked me 3 questions. What I made, why I needed a dry room, and whether I could tell, walking into a room, what had last been cooked in it. And when I answered the 3rd question honestly, which is that I could usually tell within a breath, the voice was quiet for a moment and then said, "Then come on Thursday at 6 and bring something you have bound. I would like to smell it." I want to tell you about the missal, because the missal is why I was standing on that stair, and because the missal is the kind of thing my grandmother would have done. A small parish on the other side of the river had brought me an 18th century missal with a broken spine and a tech block coming apart at the gatherings, and they could pay almost nothing, and I had taken it anyway. The way my grandmother always took the thing that mattered to people who could not pay, and I had spent a month resewing it on cords on her frame, the slow, correct way, and I had it drying under weight in the studio near the Saône when the river came up in the night, in the second flood of the year, and the studio took 4 inches of water, and the missal, which I had set, like an idiot, like a tired person, on the lower shelf, drank the river. I spent a night and a day trying to save it, and I saved most of it and not all of it. And I gave it back to the parish with an apology and without a bill, and I paid out of my own empty pocket for the materials to redo what the water had taken. And then I sat in my flooded studio and understood that I could not be a person who saves what other people cannot replace if I could not even keep my own hands dry, and that the careful version of me would simply absorb this, quietly, the way my grandmother absorbed everything, and keep working in the damp until the damp took something else. And for the first time, really, I did not absorb it quietly. I went and found a dry room. It is the smallest brave thing I have ever done, and it is the one that led to all the rest. And I think it is worth telling you that the whole of my life turned on the day I refused, just once, to keep working in the damp. I brought a small clamshell box I had made the month before, in goatskin over millboard, lined in a handmade paper I had marbled myself. I climbed 4 flights of the old stone stair in the silk quarter on a Thursday at 6. And the door at the top was opened by a woman in a charcoal work coat with her sleeves turned back once, with dark hair pinned up off her neck and a pair of reading glasses pushed up into it, and gray eyes that took me in the way you take in a thing you are going to remember, whether you decide to or not. And she did not say hello. She said, "You're early by 4 minutes, which is the correct amount. Come in." And I came in. The front room of Sabine's apartment is the perfumery. There is a tall window over the courtyard, and a walnut organ. That is the word for it, the orgue à parfum, the curved tiered bench of small bottles that a perfumer keeps her materials in. 200 of them rising in rows like the pipes of an instrument, and a marble bench with a brass scale and a rack of blotter strips and a row of beakers, and the whole room held a scent so layered and so quiet that I stood in the doorway and did the thing my grandmother taught me to do, which is to stop and let a room finish arriving before you walk into the middle of it. Sabine watched me do it. I did not know yet that she watched me do it. She told me, weeks later, that she had decided to rent me the room in the 4 seconds I stood in her doorway, with my eyes half closed sorting her air, because in 11 years of clients and students, she had met perhaps 4 people who knew to let a room finish, and she had married none of them, and rented to none of them. And here was a bookbinder on her doorstep, with a goatskin box, doing it without being asked. She took the box. She did the thing with it I would learn. She did with everything. She did not look at it first. She smelled it first. the goat skin and then the marbled linings and then the small interior breath of the paste I had used, and only then did she open it and look inside, and she said, "You use a wheat paste, not a synthetic, and you cook it yourself, and you have not changed your recipe in years." And I said, "It was my grandmother's recipe." And she said, "I can smell that it is somebody's grandmother's. The room is $200 a month. It is dry. I work in the front room from 8 until 2, and I see clients in the afternoons, and I would ask you to keep the back room and the kitchen, and to treat the front room as mine. You may use the kitchen at any hour. I am told I am quiet. I will not be quiet about scent. I will sometimes need to know what you smell, because a second trained nose in a building is worth more than money, and you have a trained nose, and I am going to want to borrow it. Do you accept?" I said yes. I moved in 9 days later with my sewing frame and my bone folder and my grandmother's recipe in my head, and I lived in the small dry back room of the perfumery on the slope of the Croix Rousse for 7 months before the Tuesday Cleo dared me to try on the blue bottle. I want to tell you what those 7 months were, because the 4 words at the end of them did not come out of nowhere. They came out of the long, careful shape of 7 months of 2 women learning each other's air. Sabine worked in the front room from 8 until 2. I learned the sound of her working through the wall the way I had learned the sound of my grandmother working below the shop. The small clink of a stopper set down on marble, the slide of the brass weight on the scale, the long quiet of her smelling a blotter, the longer quiet of her deciding. I worked in the back room on the bindings that paid my rent, a small, steady stream of restorations and private commissions. And I cooked my wheat paste on the kitchen hob on Sunday afternoons. And the first time I cooked it, Sabine came to the kitchen doorway and stood there with her eyes half closed and said, "You cook it a little long, on purpose, for the smell." And I said, "My grandmother cooked it a little long." And Sabine said, "Your grandmother was telling you something with the smell," and went back to the front room. And I stood at the hob and did not move for a moment, because she had named in one sentence a thing about my grandmother I had felt my whole life and never said. She borrowed my nose, as she had said she would. 2 or 3 times a week, in the early months, she would knock on the backroom door frame. She always knocked. She never came in. And she would hold out a blotter strip. And she would say, "Tell me what you smell. No perfume words. Just say it." And I would smell the strip and say the true thing in the only words I had, which were a bookbinder's words. "This one smells like the inside of a book that's been in a warm room. This one smells like the rain on the stone of the quay. This one smells like my grandmother's hands at the end of the day." And Sabine would take the strip back and look at it and say, every time, "Thank you. That is what I needed," and go back to the organ. And I learned over the months that she was not testing me and she was not humoring me. She was using me the way a perfumer uses a second nose, because she had spent 11 years learning the 200 words for what scents do, and she had lost, somewheres in the 11 years, the words for what scents are. And a bookbinder who said this one smells like the inside of a warm book gave her back a thing she had traded away for expertise. I will give you the list of the small things, the way my grandmother taught me to keep a list of the small things, because the small things are the shape of it, and I had a list about Sabine by the end of the 2nd month that I did not admit was a list. She set the stopper of every bottle down with the chamfered edge toward herself, so that the wet glass wand never touched anything she would have to clean for the next person. She turned the cup handle toward me at the kitchen table on the Sunday afternoons. She sat with me while my paste cooked. She wore no perfume to work. A perfumer cannot. It deafens the nose. And so the only time the apartment held her own scent, the blue bottle scent, was in the evening after 2, when she had finished work and washed her hands and put it on at her own throat for no one, because she lived alone and saw clients in the afternoon, and put her own scent on in the evening for the simple reason that she liked to be, at the end of a day of building scent for other people, a person who smelled like herself. I learned the blue bottle scent through the wall in the evenings for 7 months before I ever held the bottle. I could not have told you what was in it. I could have told you what kind of evening she'd had by which note of it reached me last as she moved through the apartment, whether the warm, low bass of it came first, which meant she was tired and still and reading, or whether the bright top of it moved quickly down the hall, which meant she was restless and would go out. She kept a small framed thing on the wall above the organ, not a picture, a single blotter strip in a small frame, gone faint and brown with age, and she told me in the 4th month that it was the first scent her own teacher, Madame Ferry, had ever let her sign 12 years before, and that she kept it framed to remember that a scent is the only made thing that finishes itself in someone else's body, that a perfumer makes half of it, and the person who wears it makes the other half, and that she had spent 11 years making half of things and giving them to strangers to finish. I added that to the list. I did not yet understand why I had added it. She did not let me see her tired. In 7 months, I saw her tired exactly once. In the 5th month, on an evening when a client had rejected a scent she had spent 6 weeks building, a wedding scent, for a bride who had come in at the end and said it was not quite her, after Sabine had built the entire architecture of it around a description of the woman's dead mother's garden, and Sabine had come down the hall after the client left and stood in the doorway of the back room, which she never did. She always knocked on the frame, and this time she just stood in it, and she said, "Tell me what you smell," and held out the rejected blotter, and I smelled it. And it was the most beautiful thing she had ever handed me, a whole lost garden folded into a strip of paper. And I said the true thing, which was, "This smells like something somebody loved and couldn't keep." And Sabine was quiet for a long moment in the doorway, and then she said, "That is exactly what it smells like. That is exactly what she asked me to make, and exactly why she could not buy it. Because she came in wanting the garden, and she left understanding that the garden is gone, and I built her the going." And I said, "You built her grief and called it a wedding scent." And Sabine said yes, and no one can wear their own grief to their own wedding. So it comes back to me, and I will pour it down the sink tonight, because it is hers, and I cannot sell another woman someone's gone mother. And she did not pour it down the sink. She gave it to me, the blotter, and said, "Keep it. You are the only person who smelled what it was, and I have it still, in the small clamshell box I made, the gone garden of a stranger's dead mother, because it was the first time Sabine handed me something she could not give to a client, and I understood, holding it, that I had become the place she put the things that were too true to sell." That was the evening, the strip of paper, the one I said I would tell you about. It was not a romantic evening. It was the evening I learned what she actually did for a living, which was not make people smell nice. It was find the true thing inside what a person asked for, and build it, even when the true thing was the thing they could not afford to know they wanted. I lay awake that night too. I was doing a great deal of lying awake by the 5th month. I will tell you the last of the list, the small things from the 6th and 7th months, the ones that should have told me what was happening, if I had been a person who let herself know things. She started cooking. She did not cook. She had told me in the first week that a working nose cannot stand a kitchen full of competing food smells, and that she ate simply and late. And in the 6th month, she started making, on the Sunday afternoons while my paste cooked, a single pot of something quiet and long simmered, a daub, a soup, something that could share the air with wheat paste without fighting it. And we would eat it at the kitchen table at the end of the afternoon. And I realize now that she had reorganized the one rule of her professional life: keep the kitchen neutral, around the single window of the week when I was in the kitchen, and that she had done it without saying anything, the way she did everything that mattered. And she stopped seeing afternoon clients on Sundays. And she left the reading glasses off when she sat with me, which I learned meant she was not working, that the glasses were a kind of armor, and she had stopped wearing the armor on Sunday afternoons. And the blue scent, which had only ever been in the apartment after 2, began to be in the apartment on Sunday afternoons, too, earlier, which meant she was putting it on before I came to the kitchen, which meant I did not let myself finish the sentence in the 7th month, but I can finish it now, which meant she was dressing for me in the only way a perfumer dresses, And I was lying in the next room at night breathing it and not letting myself know. And then we were two careful women building the base of a thing neither of us would name for 7 months, until a friend from Paris stood at the organ and dared me to smell what I had already been breathing. I want to tell you about Cleo and the dare, because the dare is the catalyst, and because the dare was not really a dare, it was a permission. And Cleo knew it was a permission, which is the kind of thing the good friends know before you do. Cleo is my oldest friend. We met at 19 in a bookbinding course neither of us finished. She went into theater design, and I went into my grandmother's recipe. And she had come down to Lyon for a long weekend in the 3rd week of October to see a show she was building costumes for. And she stayed in my small dry back room, on a folding cot, for 4 nights. Cleo has the particular gift of walking into the middle of a thing you have been carefully not looking at and naming it before her coat is off. She had been in the apartment for 2 hours on the first evening, with Sabine still out at a client's when she said, from the cot, while I sewed, "You're in love with your landlady." And I said, without looking up from the sewing, "She's my landlady." And Cleo said, "That is not a denial, that is a job title," and I kept sewing. On the Tuesday, the 4th evening, the last before Cleo went back to Paris, Sabine was out at a client's dinner and would not be back until 10. And Cleo and I drank a bottle of the cheap Côtes du Rhône I kept in the back room. And Cleo wandered into the front room, which I had told her was Sabine's and not to be disturbed. And she stood at the walnut organ and she said, "Which one does she wear?" And I said, "The blue one on the left." And Cleo said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Because I have smelled it through the wall for 7 months." And Cleo turned around and looked at me for a long moment and she said, very gently, "Oh, you are so far gone." And then she said the thing that was the dare and was not a dare. She said, "Put it on, just once, not to keep. Just so you know what it is. You've been breathing through a wall for 7 months, like a person standing outside a bakery. Put it on, smell it on your own skin, and then you'll know, and you can stop pretending you don't. I dare you." I want to be honest that I knew, when I crossed the front room to the organ, that I was not crossing it because Cleo had dared me. I was crossing it because I had wanted, for 7 months, to know what the scent was when it was close, when it was on skin, when it was not a thing arriving through a wall but a thing blooming up off a wrist. And Cleo had simply handed me the permission to want what I already wanted, which is the entire job of an old friend. I took the blue bottle off the left of the organ. The glass was cool and heavier than I expected. The ground glass stopper came out with the small sound like a held breath let go. I tipped the bottle and touched the cool glass wand to the inside of my left wrist once, and I set the bottle down and the scent bloomed up off my own skin for the first time. Close. Mine. And it was. I will not try to give you the 200 words I do not have. It smelled like the inside of my grandmother's shop at the end of a winter afternoon, leather and warm paper, and a sweetness underneath that I could not name and have still not named. And I understood in the first breath of it on my own skin why I had been breathing it through the wall for 7 months without admitting it, because it smelled like the one place I had ever been that was entirely safe. And Sabine had been wearing the smell of my safest place at her own throat every evening for 7 months, and I had been lying in the dark in the next room breathing it. Cleo had gone to the bathroom. I was standing in the front room with the scent on my wrist, and my eyes closed when I heard the front door, 2 hours early, and Sabine came in. I want to be exact about the next minute, because the next minute is the one I have spent 3 weeks and the months since living inside of. She came into the front room in her charcoal work coat with a paper bag of bread under her arm, because the client's dinner had ended early, and she stopped just inside the door. I had the blue bottle on the organ where I had set it down, and her scent on my wrist and my eyes still half closed, and the guilt arriving on my face a half second behind the rest of me. There is a version of the next minute that should have happened and did not. In that version, a careful perfumer comes home to find her tenant has gone into the front room she has been asked to treat as private and has handled and worn the one scent the perfumer has never sold and never named. The personal one, the intimate one, and the perfumer is, rightly, cool about it. And there is a small correct apology, and the tenant goes back to the dry back room having learned not to touch what is not hers, and they are careful with each other until the lease is up. That version was available. It is the version my grandmother would have made happen, because my grandmother was a woman who apologized first and quickly and got herself back behind the correct line before anyone could decide anything about her. I started to make that version happen. I opened my mouth and I started to say, "I'm sorry. Cleo dared me. I shouldn't have. And Sabine set the bread down on the marble bench and she crossed the room and she did not let me finish the apology. She took my left wrist in her hand, not hard. Completely. The way she took a blotter she had decided to keep. The way she lifted a stopper she had decided to smell. With the whole calm authority of a woman who has spent 11 years deciding what a thing is by bringing it close. She lifted my wrist to the air between us, and she bent her head and she smelled her own scent on my skin. Not on the bottle, not on a blotter, on my skin, where it had been blooming and changing for 10 minutes against the warmth of my own blood, where it had become the way a scent becomes, half hers and half mine, and she was quiet for a count that I did not measure because I had stopped being able to measure things. And then she straightened up, and she looked at me, and the cool, correct version of the minute was gone. It had never been in the room. And she said, in the low, even voice she used when she had decided what a thing was, "Then wear it out." I said, because I did not understand, because I was still half inside the apology, "Wear it out." And she said, still holding my wrist in the same low, even voice, "It is half mine and half yours now. It has never smelled like that on me. It has been on your skin 10 minutes, and it is already a scent I have spent 11 years trying to build and never once managed, because the part I cannot make is the part the skin makes, and your skin has made it. I am not going to wash that off you and pretend it didn't happen. I have an opening tonight, a client's gallery, in the Presqu'île, people I have to be seen by. Come with me, wear it out. Let me spend one evening beside the only correct version of my own scent that has ever existed. That is what I am asking. You may say no, and I will let go of your wrist, and we will be careful, and it will be a thing that did not happen. Or you may go and put on something you can dance in and wear my scent out into a room full of people beside me, and we will find out what the next part is. Decide. I want to tell you what I did with my free hand while she spoke, because it is the thing I am quietly proud of. I reached across with my free hand and I closed it over her hand, where it held my wrist, not to pull away, to keep it there, and I said the true thing in the only words I had, which were a bookbinder's words. I said, "Smells like my grandmother's shop." It has smelled like my grandmother's shop through the wall for 7 months. I have been lying in the dark breathing the smell of the only safe place I ever had, and it was coming off your throat, and I didn't let myself know. I'm not going to wash it off either. I'll wear it out. She did not smile. Sabine did not smile the way other people smile. She had a single millimeter at the corner of her mouth that did the work other people's whole faces did, and the millimeter came, and she let go of my wrist, slowly, and she said, "Then we leave in 40 minutes. Wear the blue. I'll wear nothing, so the room only smells it on you." And she went down the hall to change, and Cleo came out of the bathroom into the front room, and looked at my face and said quietly, "Oh," and then she said, "I'm getting the late train. You don't need me tonight." And she was right. And she hugged me hard in the doorway, and she whispered, "You are not your grandmother. Do you understand me? You are not going to spend your life behind the correct line." And she took the late train to Paris, and I never got to thank her properly. And I am thanking her now. I want to tell you about the gallery night, because the gallery night was the door, and because what happened at the gallery is the thing that made the 3 weeks possible. I wore the blue. I had one dress that was not a working dress, a dark green silk thing I had bound a wedding album for a designer in exchange for 2 years before, and I put it on in the small dry back room with my hands not quite steady, and I came out into the hall, and Sabine was waiting by the door in a charcoal suit, with the collar open and no scent on her at all, deliberately bare, so that, as she had said, the only place in the room her scent would live that night was on my skin. She looked at me for a moment in the green silk, and she did not say anything about the dress. She leaned in and she smelled the scent, at the side of my throat, where it had moved in the 40 minutes from my wrist, and she straightened up and the millimeter came and she said only, "It's an hour old on you now, and it's better than it has ever been at an hour on me. Let's go." The gallery was in the Presqu'île, between the two rivers, a long white room full of the particular people a perfumer has to be seen by. A client whose wedding scent she had built, a critic, two gallery owners, a woman from a house in Paris who watched Sabine across the room the whole evening with the flat attention of someone deciding whether to make an offer. Sabine moved through them the way she moved through her own front room, precisely without waste, and she kept me at her left side the whole evening, my scented wrist near her bare one, and I understood within the first half hour what she was doing. Because I have my grandmother's nose and I could smell it happening. The room was smelling her scent and turning toward it, and the scent was not on her, it was on me, and so the room kept turning toward me without knowing why. And Sabine stood beside it all with the flat, calm pride of a maker watching a made thing finish itself in someone else's body, in a room full of witnesses. The woman from the Paris house came over at one point and said to Sabine, "What is she wearing? I don't know it." And Sabine said, "You don't know it because it doesn't exist. It's only ever existed in this room tonight." And the woman looked at me the way you look at a thing you can't not buy and went away. And Sabine put her hand flat against the small of my back for the first time, lightly, just for a moment, and took it away. We did not touch beyond that at the gallery. That is the thing I want you to understand about the door. It did not open onto the obvious room. We left at 11 and walked back across the Presqu'île and up the slope of the Croix Rousse in the cold October night, not touching, talking about the woman from the Paris house and the critic, and whether the client had liked her wedding scent. And at the top of the stairs outside our own door, Sabine stopped with the key in her hand. And she did not unlock the door, and she turned to me and she smelled the scent on me one more time, at the throat, where 6 hours had taken it all the way down to the warm base, and she said, "It's at the base now. The bright is gone. This is the part that's left when everything that's easy has burned off." She was quiet a moment, and then she said, "I would like to do this slowly, if you would. I have spent 11 years making things fast and giving them away. I do not want to make this one fast." And I said, "I cook my paste a little long." And she unlocked the door, and we went in, and she did not come to my room that night, and I did not go to hers, and I lay in the dark in the small dry back room, with her scent at the base of itself on my own throat, and the front room door, for the first time in 7 months, standing open down the hall, and it was the most awake I have ever been in a bed in my life. I want to give you the shape of the 3 weeks, the way I gave you the shape of the 7 months, because the 3 weeks are the heart of this, and the gallery night was only the door. We did not become, the next morning, 2 people who pretended. That is the thing I most want you to understand about Sabine, and the thing that took me the 7 months and the gallery night to learn. She did not have a careful version and a true version, the way I did, the way my grandmother had. She had spent 11 years being precise, which is not the same as being careful. Careful is about protecting yourself. Precise is about getting the thing right. Sabine had never once, in 7 months, said a thing to me that was less than true in order to keep herself safe, and she did not start the morning after the gallery. She made coffee. She turned the cup handle toward me. She sat across the kitchen table from me in the early light, with her own scent still faintly on my wrist from the night before. And she said, "I want to tell you the terms, because I am a person who says the terms. You are my tenant. I am not going to be a landlady who uses the lease as a way to keep a person who might want to leave. So the room is yours for as long as you want it, whatever happens between us. And if it goes wrong, you keep the room. That is not negotiable. I will not have you homeless, because I could not keep my hands to myself." Inside that, she paused, and the millimeter came. Inside that, I would like to find out what the next part is, slowly, because I am 33 and I have made half of things and given them away for 11 years, and I do not want to make half of this. I want to make all of it, which means slowly. Do you understand what I am asking? I said, "You're asking to do it the way you'd build a scent." She looked at me for a moment and she said, "Yes, from the base up, the base first. The base is the part that lasts when everything bright has burned off. Most people build from the top because the top is what you smell first, and it is the easiest to fall in love with, and their scents fall apart by evening because there is nothing underneath. I want to build this one from the base. Can you live at the speed of the base? I said, I'm a bookbinder. I cook my paste a little long on purpose. I can live at the speed of the base. And the millimeter became, for the first time in 7 months, an actual smile, small and complete, and she said, I know. I have watched you cook it. I want to tell you what living at the speed of the base actually meant in the first days, because it is the part people do not believe when I tell it, and it is the part that saved us. It meant that on the second morning, she did not kiss me when she wanted to. I could see that she wanted to. I had learned her face by then. And instead, she made the coffee and turned the handle toward me and said, out loud, plainly, the way she said the terms, I want to kiss you, and I am not going to yet because I kissed too many things too early for 11 years and watched them fall apart by evening, and I am going to find out what you are like before I am dazzled by you, because the dazzle is the top note, and it burns off, and I want to know what is underneath it before I cannot smell anything but it. And I said, that is the least romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. And she said, I know. And it is the most honest. And you are the kind of person who can tell the difference. That is why I am saying it to you and not to someone who needs the top note. And she was right. I was the kind of person who could tell the difference. My grandmother had at least given me that, a nose for the true thing under the easy thing in leather and in paper, and it turned out in a woman who refused to dazzle me on purpose so that I would still be there when the dazzle wore off. So the base in those first days was this. We worked. She in the front room from 8 until 2, me in the back room on the bindings that paid the rent that she had told me I would keep no matter what. We ate the long, quiet pot at the kitchen table. She scented my wrist after dinner and held it the 10 minutes. She left every door open. And we talked, God, we talked, the way you talk when you have decided not to rush the other thing. The talk became the thing. The talk was where all the heat went, and so the talk got very hot. We talked about my grandmother and her mother and the flood that took the missile and the bride who could not buy her dead mother's garden, and the 11 years of half things, and the 19 years of careful loneliness. And by the end of the first week, I knew her the way you know a book you have rebound, from the inside, from the order of the gatherings. And she knew me the same way, and when she finally did kiss me. But I am getting ahead of myself. The kiss is later. The kiss is at the kitchen table after Graça. And I want to keep things in their order, because she taught me that the order is the whole thing. So we built from the base up across the 3 weeks, and I will give you the small things, because the small things were the base. She started leaving the front room door open in the evenings. After 2, when she put her scent on, she had always closed it before, to keep the working room separate, and now she left it open, so that the blue bottle scent moved freely down the hall to the back room where I worked. And the first evening she left it open, I understood that she was doing, on purpose, as a gift, the thing I had been stealing through the wall for 7 months. And I went to the front room doorway, and I did not say anything. I just stood in it the way she had stood in my doorway with the blotters. And she looked up from the organ, and the millimeter came. And neither of us said anything, and it was the loudest evening of my life. She put her scent on my wrist herself in the second week. Instead of letting me put it on, she would take my left wrist after dinner, the way she had taken it the first night, and she would touch the cool glass with wand to the inside of it once, and then she would hold the wrist for the 10 minutes it took the scent to bloom and turn against my skin, and she would smell it changing, with her eyes closed, with my pulse under her thumb, and she told me in the second week that she had spent 11 years smelling scent change on blotter strips and on the insides of her own wrists, and that she had never once been allowed to smell it change on the skin of a person and she did not finish the sentence. And she did not need to, because by the second week, we had agreed without agreeing that the sentences did not need to be finished, that the base did not need the top yet. She taught me to smell, in the 3 weeks, the way she smelled, not to replace my bookbinder's words. She was clear about that. She said, your words are the reason I want you near my work. Do not trade them for mine." But she stood behind me at the organ in the evenings, after 2, with her own scent on both our wrists now, and she would take a material down and let me smell it and tell me the true thing in my words. And then she would tell me the one perfumer's word for it, not to correct me, but so that I had both. The way a person who speaks 2 languages has 2 words for bread and is richer for it. She taught me the difference between the smell of a thing and the smell of the memory the thing unlocks, which she said was the whole secret of her trade, that nobody pays for a scent, they pay for the door the scent opens, and that the cheapest perfumer builds the scent and the expensive one builds the door. I told her that was bookbinding too, that nobody wants the binding. They want the book to fall open in their hands the way it fell open for them the first time, and that a restoration is not making the book new, it is making the book able to open again the way it used to. And she put her chin on my shoulder from behind, at the organ. The first time she had put her weight against me at all, and she said into the side of my hair, "We have the same job. We have always had the same job. I make the thing that opens the door in the nose, and you make the thing that opens the door in the hand. And I have spent 11 years thinking I was the only one in the building who knew there was a door." She was not careful with my body and careful with my heart, the way frightened people are, taking the easy thing fast to avoid the hard thing slowly. She was the opposite, which I had never met before. She would hold my scented wrist for 10 minutes with her eyes closed and her thumb on my pulse and not kiss me. And I understood by the end of the first week that the 10 minutes were not restraint in the way I had always meant restraint. They were not her holding herself back from something. They were the thing itself. She was a woman who had spent her life learning that the slow attention is the love, that the smelling it change is not the prelude to the event, it is the event, and that everyone else had been in such a hurry to get to the obvious room that they had walked straight past the actual one. By the second week, I had stopped waiting for the 10 minutes to become something else and started understanding that they already were the something else. And that was the first time in my life I had ever been in the actual room with another person instead of the obvious one. She gave me a key to the front room. It sounds small. It was not small. For 7 months, the front room had been hers, the working room, the room I let finish arriving before I crossed it, the room I had broken the rule of on the night of the dare. In the second week, she took my hand at the kitchen table and put a small brass key in it and closed my fingers around it and said, "This is for the front room. Not because you need it. There is no lock you need to open. Because I want there to be no room in this apartment that is mine and not yours. I have lived behind a working door for 11 years. I am giving you the door." And I held the small brass key and I thought of my grandmother giving up the lease on the shop the year she died, handing the key back to a landlord, the careful woman handing her door away at the end instead of giving it to someone at the beginning. And I put Sabine's key on the ring next to my own, and I did not say any of that. But Sabine watched my face and said, "Your grandmother." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "You keep doing a thing with your face when a door is mentioned." And I said, "I know." And she said, "We will fix it slowly." And she did. She told me about Madame Ferry. Madame Ferry is 81. She was Sabine's teacher, the great nose who had trained her, who lived now in a small flat in the Presqu'île full of the sense of a 60-year career. And Sabine took me to meet her in the third week, on a Sunday, with the blue scent on my wrist, and Madame Ferry, who is blind now, who reads the world entirely through her nose, took my wrist in her 2 old hands before Sabine had finished introducing me, and smelled the scent on my skin and was quiet for a long time. And then she said, to Sabine, not to me, in French, the thing that named it, the thing the knowing old woman always says when the 2 people cannot. "Ah, so this is the skin you have been missing." I wondered what was missing. 11 years I have smelled your scents, and known something was missing, and you would never let me say what. It was a skin. You needed a particular skin to finish it on, and now you have found the skin, and you have brought it to me to be sure, because you do not trust your own nose about your own heart. Well, I am sure. Marry the skin, Sabine. And Sabine, who did not blush, blushed, and Madame Ferry, who is blind, felt the heat of it come off her former student's face and laughed, a small, dry, delighted laugh, and patted my wrist and said to me in careful English, "He cooks his paste a little long. This one, I can smell it. A person who cooks the paste long is a person who knows that the good things finish slowly. You will be good for her. She makes everything too fast except the things that matter." I added nothing to the list after that, because the list was finished. I had been keeping a list of the small things about a woman I was not letting myself love, and a blind 81-year-old perfumer had smelled the whole list off my wrist in 4 seconds and read it back to me as a single sentence, and there was nothing left to add. I want to tell you about the crisis, because the crisis was real, and it was the kind that the careful people lose to. On the Thursday of the 3rd week, the letter came, an email, but it did the work of the letter. It was from Grasse, from the south, from the town that is to Perfume what my grandmother's quarter had once been to Silk, and it was an offer Sabine had been waiting for since she was 22. A house, a real house, an old maison de parfum that had been blending since the 18th century, was offering her a master perfumer's chair and her own atelier, and the materials budget that an independent in a 4th-floor flat in Lyon can only dream about, and a line under her own name, and it started in 5 weeks, in Grasse, 400 kilometers south. It was the thing she had built half of everything for 11 years to be offered. It was the top note of her whole career arriving at last. And it was. I understood the moment she told me. Reading it at the kitchen table with the early light on her face, it's the noble exit dressed as the dream. Because here was the reason, the unanswerable reason, the reason that let the careful version of each of us say the careful thing. Of course you have to go. It's grasp. It's the chair. It's everything you've worked for. We had 3 beautiful weeks. Let's not make it more than the base of a thing that never got to have a top. I want to be honest about how close I came, because I came as close as I have ever come to anything. I sat at the kitchen table while she read me the email, and I felt the family recipe rise up in me, whole and warm and reasonable. The careful arithmetic my grandmother had simmered into me a little long on purpose. She has wanted Grasse since she was 22. You are 3 weeks old. You are a bookbinder who can work anywhere, but who has in fact just clawed her way to dry footing in Lyon after a flood took everything. The noble thing, the dignified thing, the thing that lets you keep your pride intact and hand her back her dream mended and ask for very little, is to smile and say, "I'll just fine, this was lovely," and to mean the "I'll be fine," the way my grandmother meant it for 19 years, which is to say to not be fine at all, ever, but to be fine about it, which is the whole and entire art the women in my family had perfected and died of. I felt the recipe rise. I knew every step of it. I had watched it cooked my whole childhood. And I understood at the kitchen table that I was about to cook it one more time, for the last good reason I would ever be offered, and that if I cooked it now, I would cook it forever, that there is no last time you are careful, there is only the time you decide you are a careful person, and then you are one until you die smelling of paste in the back of a shop. She did not say that, though. She read me the email, evenly, all of it, and then she set the laptop down and she looked at me and she said, "I am going to tell you what I want to do. And then I am going to ask you what you want, and we are going to decide it together. Because I'm not going to be a person who makes this decision alone in order to be kind to you. I have wanted Grasse since I was 22. And I have spent 3 weeks building the base of the first thing I have ever wanted to make all of. And I am 33 years old, and I have finally learned the difference this month between the thing you have wanted since you were 22 and the thing you want now. And they are not always the same thing. And the bravest people are the ones who can tell when they have stopped being the same. I do not know yet which this is. So I am asking you not to decide for me, to decide with me. What do you want? And I did the thing my grandmother never did. I did not do the kind thing. I did not say go to Grasse. It's your dream. I'll be fine, which is what the careful version of me had already half said in my chest. I reached across the kitchen table and I took her left wrist the way she had taken mine, completely. And I said, "Here's what I want. I want to build the top of this. I have spent my whole life behind the correct line, being kind to people by leaving before they could decide anything about me. And my grandmother spent her whole life that way. And she died smelling of paste in the back of a shop, having given everybody half of everything, and kept the correct line her whole life. And I am not going to do it. I am not going to be kind to you by disappearing. So I am not going to tell you to go to grass. I am going to tell you that I will come to grass. I bind books. I can bind books in grass. I can cook my paste a little long on a hob in the south as easily as a hob in Lyon. I am not asking you to choose between the chair and me, because that is a false choice that the careful version of Sisyphus invented to give us each a noble way out, and I am refusing the noble way out. Take the chair. I'll wear your scent to grass. We'll build the top of it down there, in the town that's all top notes, from the base we built up here. That is what I want. She was quiet for a long count. The early light was on the kitchen table. My hand was around her wrist, and her pulse was under my thumb, the way mine had been under hers for 3 weeks. And then Sabine, who built from the base up, who said the terms, who had given half of everything to strangers for 11 years. Sabine turned her wrist in my hand so that her palm was against my palm, and she laced her fingers through mine, and she said, in a voice that for the first time had the smallest crack in it, the exact size of the small sound the stopper makes, "Say the part again." The part where you come to grass. I said it again. She said again. I said it again. And on the third time, she stopped asking. And she got up from her side of the kitchen table and she came around to mine, and she took my face in both her hands, the perfumer's hands, the hands that had been smelling the world for 11 years. And she kissed me slowly, from the base up, in the early light of the kitchen with her own scent on my wrist and the front room door standing open down the hall. And it was not careful. And it was not half of anything, and it was the first whole thing either of us had made in a long time. We went to grass 5 weeks later. She took the chair. I bound books. It turns out an old maison de parfum has shelves and shelves of 18th century formula books in failing leather, and a master perfumer who can say to the house I happen to know a bookbinder is a useful person to have. And I have not lacked for work in the south for 1 week since we came. We kept the Lyon apartment for a year, and then we let it go, and the walnut organ came south on a truck packed in straw like a harpsichord, and it stands now in the front room of a stone house on a hill above grass that smells, in May, of the jasmine fields below, which Sabine says is the only place on earth she has ever lived, where the air outside competes with the air she builds inside, and which I say smells, underneath the jasmine, a little like the inside of a warm book. And Sabine says I say that about everything, and she is right, I do. Madame Free came south once, before she got too frail to travel, and sat in the front room of the stone house with the organ she had taught Sabine at, and held my wrist, and smelled the scent that is now just ours, the blue one, finished, the one Sabine finally named the year we came south. She named it after the thing I said the first night. She did not name it Grandmother's Shop, which is what it smells like to me. She named it in the small exact hand she uses on the labels. A single word that is the answer to a question, the same word every time. The word she said to me holding my wrist in the front room of a Lyon apartment with a bag of bread on the marble bench. She named it encore, which is French and means again and means more, and is the word an audience says when they will not let the thing be over. I want to say one more thing about the going, because it is the thing I am most glad of. When we packed the Lyon apartment, I found at the back of the deep drawer under the walnut organ, a small wooden box of blotter strips that Sabine had kept, not framed, not labeled, just kept, and they were the scents she had built across 11 years and never sold. The ones that came back, the 2 true ones, the gone gardens. And mine was in there, the bride's dead mother's garden she had given me in the 5th month. And underneath it were dozens more, a whole archive of the things she had made that no one could afford to want. And I understood, holding the box, that Sabine had been keeping her own version of my grandmother's careful line, that she had been giving strangers the half things she could sell, and keeping the whole things in a drawer where no one would ever finish them, that she had been as lonely in her front room of 200 bottles as my grandmother had been in her shop of mended Bibles, that we were both the granddaughters of women who kept the true thing in a drawer. I showed her the box. I said, "You keep the real ones in a drawer." She said, "Where else would I keep them? No one can wear them." And I said, "I can. Wear them out on me, all of them. One at a time, the rest of our lives, until the drawer is empty, and every true thing you ever made has finished itself on somebody's skin instead of dying in a box." And that, not the kiss, not grass, not the gallery. That was the moment her face did the thing faces do. The whole thing, not the millimeter, the whole face. And she sat down on the floor of the half-packed apartment with the box of Gone Gardens in her lap, and I sat down next to her, and we went through them one at a time, and she told me what each one was, and who could not buy it, and why. And it took until 2 in the morning, and it was the night I understood I was going to spend my life emptying a perfumer's drawer of true things onto my own skin, and that there is no better way I can imagine to spend it. It is May in grass now. The jasmine is in the fields. The organ is in the front room. My grandmother's bone folder is on my bench, and reciprocity is in my hands, and her nose is in my face, and I think she would have liked it here. I think she would have stood in the doorway of this house with her eyes half closed and let it finish arriving and then come in. I think, too, and I let myself think it now, in a way I could not for 19 years, that she would have wanted this for me, even though she could never have done it for herself, that the careful women make the brave granddaughters on purpose, that the whole point of keeping the true thing in a drawer is that someone you love finds the drawer. Sabine works in the front room from 8 until 2. After 2, she washes her hands and she puts on the blue scent, Encore, at her own throat. And then she comes down the hall, and she does not knock anymore because it is our house and there is no door to knock on. And she takes my left wrist out from over my work, and she touches the cool glass wand to the inside of it once, and she holds it while it blooms. And she says, in the low, even voice that does not announce itself, "Wear it out." And I do.